Welcome to Licensed RPGs, where today we're going to take a look at Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories for the PS1, originally released in December of 1999 and brought over to the States in March of 2002. And your first question with this review is probably going to be, why is it included in LRPGs instead of Sacred Reviews? And that has to do with this rather infamous picture at this point that describes the Japanese version of this game as an adventure role-playing game. Even though I heavily disagree with this labeling and will explain why in my review, I felt that was enough justification to put into this series instead of the other one. As for why I'm making such a large skip in episodes again, it wasn't originally intending on covering this game, but my brother and I started discussing it when one of his friends suggested they do a Let's Play for Duels of the Roses, which led to me revisiting the game and being reminded of both the good and horrible aspects of this little PS1 title. But it's time to finally move on to discussing the plot. Plot-wise, this game is rather simplistic and basically boils down to defeating opponents both in the past and the future in order to gain Millennium Items in order to prevent the return of an evil sorcerer and bring an end to the rule of Heshin, who has usurped the power of the throne and has killed your parents. Of course, the future bits in this game only seem to create plot holes, and the best defense I've seen people use is the fact that Yana Yugi and Sarah referred to him as returning to his world, in quotes. That only seems to create more problems in my opinion than it solves, since it raises the question on how solving the puzzle in alternate reality would allow Yana to return to his own reality. And wouldn't such an event involving the puzzles require both of them to be completed, which isn't the case with the past version of the Millennium Puzzle, since the High Mages couldn't figure out how to reassemble it. And as far as plot holes go, we simply have to realize that the future is fine, so going back in time in order to stop the mages is entirely pointless. Though despite the relative short length of this title, it will fairly present the player with decisions. Well, this is a fine idea in principle, in this game the actual practice is a farce, since you'll really be allowed to make your own decision. And the few times you can make an actual decision, it isn't entitled to plot, which brings up another problem with this game. Even if you have the ability to defeat Heshin in the past, he'll keep doing it until you lose, so there's no way to change the actual main narrative in this game beyond the most superficial parts of the opening. Gameplay-wise, there isn't much to this title in my opinion when it comes down to the duels. In all honesty, the game is largely defined by blindsiding your opponent with overwhelming force, by utilizing powerful monsters either created through the fusion system or acquired from grinding the various mages into the dust in free duel mode. But the only other aspect of this game that holds any real importance is the equip cards. There are a few minor systems that also play into this game as well, such as field cards and celestial alignments. The field cards can boost the attack and defense power of monsters of a certain type by 500 points, while the celestial alignments can allow you or your opponent to gain 500 additional attack and defense points when battling with a monster of the weaker alignment. Albeit the alignment system rarely comes into play until you need to routinely start dealing with powerful monsters like the Gate Guardian. Albeit the only thing you need to keep in mind is that the Gate Guardian is weak to the sun, while the Blue-Eyes White Dragon is weak to Mercury. Though I should probably also discuss the fusion system in a bit more detail. Unlike the actual card game, most of the fusions in this game don't rely on specific fusion material in order to be created. Instead, the various fusion monsters are created by fusing monsters of certain types together. The only real factor to keep in mind is that if the fusion has a lower attack power of the other cards being used as fusion material, then it won't be created. So you can't fuse together a Metal Dragon with 1,850 attack with a zombie monster with 0 attack in order to create Zombie Dragon, since it has 1,600 attack power, which is less than that of Metal Dragon. And the only other system to keep in mind is that this game does allow you to input passwords, but this system is almost entirely useless, because most of the cards are extremely expensive and require a ridiculous or even an impossible amount of grinding in order to acquire, which is why to get the most bang for your time out of the system, I recommend using multiple memory cards in order to clone your own cards and trade them back to yourself. This way you don't have to actually spend star chips and only need to grind out 1,900 chips in order to build a decently powerful deck. Albeit you can probably beat most of the mages if you grind out 1,000 star chips and use the cloning method to build a deck that can routinely dish out the twin-headed Thunder Dragon. Since the earlier part of the game, this card is a beast that can easily decimate an opponent and will easily enable you to take down most of the mages in the game. Before I move on to another topic, I'd like to bring up a common misconception with the password system. People seem to routinely suggest that powerful cards are restricted by the password system, which isn't entirely true since you only need 1,900 star chips in order to purchase a twin-headed Thunder Dragon. In fact, the cards that cost the maximum amount of chips are all considered iconic cards, which is why weak monsters like Harpy Lady and Tiger X also cost the maximum amount of star chips, despite the fact that they can't compete in any way against the Dark Magician or other powerful monsters that also happen to be iconic to specific characters from the show. Another issue with this game in terms of gameplay, and probably the biggest issue, is that the game establishes rules about playing certain monsters like the Blue-Eyes Ultimate White Dragon, and allows the AI to break these rules in order to ramp up the difficulty, which brings up another problem. This game doesn't allow you to save during the final stretch, so whenever you lose a duel, you'll need to restart from your last save and try to make your way through the gauntlet of 7 opponents all over again. This wouldn't be so bad if the game is based on skill, but because it all boils down to overwhelming your opponent, you'll be at a massive disadvantage and you'll probably fail to clear this final hurdle multiple times because of getting bad hands at the start of the duel. This is almost inexcusable in my opinion, since my failures aren't because of my poor deck design or misplaying my cards, but down to the game literally cheating in order to win. And before I move on to the graphics and sound, I'd like to bring up my final reason on why this game doesn't count as an RPG. An RPG, in my opinion, allows the player to grow stronger through combat, and more specifically by successfully defeating opponents. In this game, your only rewards for winning duels are star chips and a random card based on how well or poorly you did against your opponent. So I'm sure I don't consider grinding out star chips in order to buy cards, or grinding out cards from your enemies to be enough to constitute this game as an RPG. Graphically speaking, the game is alright for the most part. The game does support 3D models when battling against an opposing monster, but the 3D models range from decent to downright appalling. Even if it wasn't a factor, I rarely take advantage of this feature since it only slows the game down and doesn't really add anything to the game in my opinion. Outside of duels, the game does have a few 3D environments to work with when selecting which of the various mages to fight against, in order to acquire the Millennium items in the past, which is passable in my opinion. The real highlight are some of the 2D background images in this game, which in conjunction with the music work to build atmosphere rather well in a lot of places. In my opinion, this game would actually be rather decent if it wasn't for the fact that your final 7 opponents are blatant cheaters. While the other issues detract from this game, that previous issue alone is far more annoying and contributes far more to my relatively low opinion of this title. So my final opinion is to give this game a pass unless you're looking for a frustrating experience that isn't particularly rewarding even if you succeed.